everyone, it's Kim, and welcome back to Read It and Eat. Welcome back to Read It and Eat. I'm here today to bring you a well overdue both July and August reading wrap up. So sorry for the delay, but I have some really exciting books to talk to you about. So I'm going to break it up into two piles per usual. I've got some fiction and some nonfiction. Starting on the fiction side, I read On You's Ghost Music. You might recognize this book from the summer Read It and Eat box. Now in every Read It and Eat box, I curate culinary adventures around different themes by pairing books and food together. The fiction book option for the mushroom box was Ghost Music. I also read this with my book club locally in Buffalo. And I gotta say, this was a challenging book to read because I don't think I've read anything quite like it. So you follow a young wife. Song Yan has married a man. They live together and his mother comes to live with them. And at the start of the book, you think this whole story is going to be about relationships, filial piety, the relationship between the mother-in-law, if you will, and the mother. She was a classically trained pianist, and now she essentially is just staying at home while her husband's at work. And her mother-in-law is constantly asking her, when is she going to have a child? And then mysteriously, these mushrooms, orders of mushrooms show up, all different kinds of mushrooms, and she doesn't know where they came from, and they start to cook together. Meanwhile, Song Yan tracks down who's sending the mushrooms, and they're coming from Bai Yu, who surprisingly and mysteriously enough is a concert pianist himself, very famous, who disappeared many years ago. And she ends up finding him. I don't want to give up too much because it's such a mysterious book. Like, it really leaves you wondering what was real and what wasn't. And I think that's the fun of the book. It really brought up a lot of conversation during book club because we liked it, but we were confused. And I guess you really aren't supposed to totally understand or really know what is truth or what is not. I really hope you pick this book up because I would love to hear your thoughts, because there's a lot of relationship conversations that are happening. Meanwhile, there's just a lot of weird, mysterious stuff happening. Really liked it. And the tie to mushrooms was super obvious because she's literally cooking and eating these mushrooms, but she's also dreaming and kind of talking to some mushrooms of her own. Another book I read this month, or in the last 2 months, is Love and Saffron. This is by Kim Fay. My little sister got this copy for me. And it is a story about two different writers. One is very young in her career. Her name is, I'm terrible with names, Joan. And meanwhile, Joan writes a letter to Imogen. And Imogen is a very well-established food writer. Imogen lives on an island with her husband, kind of just enjoy the Kamano Islands, just kind of enjoying her life. And young Joan is discovering herself as a food writer in bustling Los Angeles. This is told entirely through letters. And the first letter starts because Joan sends Imogen a fan letter and a parcel of saffron. The final fiction book I read this month is Devon and Chris Plan a Wedding. This is fake dating, fake engagement. This is a queer relationship, female, and women of color, which was pretty awesome. I thought it would have to do with food because they plan a wedding, but it really was more about kind of like Love is Blind / 90 Day Fiance, but a queer lens, and how can they have real feelings when they're lying to everyone about being in a relationship? It was a cute read, a fun read. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting or looking for, but really like reading diversely, having some new representation to read about. So I will probably donate this one to my little free library. Okay, so 3 fiction books. Technically one was romance, but it's fine. Now on to the nonfiction. The first 2 nonfiction books you have already seen me review on this channel. The first was Raw Dog, a memoir / naked truth about hot dogs by Jamie Loftus. I did a full review on this on my channel back in July, so I'll link it above and down below. The other nonfiction book I've already reviewed on this channel is Unreasonable Hospitality, The Remarkable Power of Giving People More Than They Expect by Will Widara. I read this because it was featured in FX show The Bear season 2, and I wanted to review it. I also did a whole, two more videos for each of these. They each have 2 videos. They each have individual book reviews and recommended reading lists. If you want to learn more about hot dogs, I've got a reading list for you. And if you want another reading list about books about hospitality, the front of the restaurant, and waiters, I have another list for you as well. I will also link those to you. Give a little extra love to that hospitality video. It's not getting as many views as I'd like to see, but I always appreciate your support. Also, don't forget to hit like and subscribe on these videos. I really count on your engagement. Okay, I have 2 more other nonfiction books. So far we've got 3 fiction, 2 nonfiction I've already reviewed, and now these 2 I haven't talked about yet on my channel. So 7 books in 2 months. The first, both of these I listened to as audiobooks. The first is To Fall in Love, Drink This, a wine writer's memoir by Alice Sari Fearing. This book was on the shortlist for a James Beard Award, I believe in the category of wine, so I wanted to pick it up and read it this year. And Alice narrates the book herself, and she writes about natural wine. And it was really interesting to learn and listen to Alice talk about why she liked telling the stories about wine, not just the vineyards, but the specific stories and all of this richness, while also comparing it to her life. In a way, she grew up in like New York City and lived in New York City to separated parents, and she's Jewish. So one of the things I learned from this book is that there are very few kosher approved wines, let alone very rarely do you find a kosher approved natural wine. So that is a whole other subcurrent and subplot, if you will, of this memoir, is her love of natural wine and trying to get her mom to enjoy these wines when her mom is a very devout Jewish woman who celebrates the Sabbath and is it the Sabbath? Oh my gosh, what is the word? When sundown happens? Shabbat, excuse me. So it's a very fun dynamic to watch those 2 go back and forth, especially as Alice continues to grow through her career. Her mother still doesn't quite understand it. She's not married. Why aren't you having children? All these like Jewish tropes that made me laugh while listening to it. I really, really recommend that you read To Fall in Love, Drink This, a wine writer's memoir. I can see why it got nominated. It has such charm. But at the end of each chapter, what I really liked is that the author will give you a list of natural wines or whatever topic she's talking about in each chapter, recommended wines for you to try and why. So I always like that there's almost like a takeaway. It's not a recipe because it's wine, but recommendations at the end of each chapter as well. And then the final book I read in August was To Grow Boldly, Finding Joy, Adventure, and Dinner in Your Own Backyard by Tamar Haspel. This came out last year, and it's a love letter to the unexpected delights and so-called first-hand food for meals that we grow, forage, fish, and even hunt from the world around us. So it's part memoir, part how-to guide. This was another of the James Beard nominated books. So I have now read all 3 of the James Beard nominated books for 2023 for nonfiction, narrative nonfiction. So I will have another video coming out just for those 3. It took me a little while, but I've read all 3 of them now and want to give you my thoughts. I found this book so charming. Tamar narrates it as well. And it really is like a how-to. She is a woman who grew up in New York City and then during this pandemic had an opportunity with her husband to move to Cape Cod. And they do, and they buy a plot of land, and it starts with learning to hunt for mussels, to planting a garden, to getting chickens, to learning to hunt, to fish, to buying a boat, to backing up the boat into the water, and all of these things that I wasn't a huge outdoorsy kid growing up, but I did spend almost every summer going to Maine to visit family. So I have memories of looking for oysters and going fishing and being on motorboats, little tiny speedboats and stuff like that. And I've always had this connection to, my family was the kind of family that went camping in like a pop-up camper. So I was not like a Girl Scout. I probably could never actually survive in the woods, but I have a lot of fun memories of hiking and learning and being in nature. And it was really fun to watch essentially this New York City slicker move to Cape Cod with her husband and learn to eat not only farm to table, but she set a challenge with her husband that every day of an entire calendar year, they would have to have one thing on the plate that they grew or harvested themselves. And I thought it was a really ambitious challenge. And part of me was like, I want to do that. And then thought about my own backyard and how I have maybe 4 tiny, pathetic little cucumbers growing and thought I would starve, or I would at least lose the challenge. But it was such a fun book. She had me laughing because she was very open and very good with her humor about every fail and every win. Like, they did not think turkeys could fly, and suddenly they had turkeys that could fly. It was super charming, and I cannot wait to give you the review of those 3 nominated books in an upcoming video. This book, To Grow Boldly, was one of the 3 that was nominated for the James Beard Award in narrative nonfiction. So, of the 7 books I read in the last 2 months, it's actually kind of hard to pick a favorite. I really loved every nonfiction book I read in the past 2 months, but I really think To Grow Boldly is up at the top because it had just the right amount of like approachability and whimsy, and it's really great for someone who doesn't. If you think that you can't make an impact by making one more small change, learning to sprout seedlings or something, I encourage you to read To Grow Boldly, because that has me excited for, I mean, we're about to go into autumn, so in Buffalo, everything is gonna get cold and die, but like, what could I do next year to plan ahead? And I know Dan's been talking about a potato garden in the backyard, so who knows? Maybe we will have potatoes. So favorite book, To Grow Boldly. Second favorite is probably To Fall in Love, Drink This. Least favorite, I'm gonna give to Devon and Chris Plan a Wedding, just because it wasn't what I thought it was gonna be. It's not a bad book, it just wasn't my favorite. And I think I talked about this in my review of Jamie's book, Hot Dog or Raw Dog. I liked it, but I wanted more. It almost felt like there was a little bit of conflicting narratives within this book. So some wins, some okays, and some maybe pass, skip. Let me know in the comments below, have you read any of these books? I'm really interested to see if anyone's read Ghost Music, has anyone read Raw Dog, or has anyone read To Grow Boldly? I would love to hear from you. Don't forget to follow me across different social media channels like my Instagram, Read It and Eat Box, where I'm always talking about the next upcoming culinary adventure box for the brand. Our next box is going to be Korea themed, focused around David Chang and his memoir, Eat a Peach. I hope you're well. I hope you're eating something great and reading something delicious, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.